If the fires of God, an incendiary God, descend upon us, then surely we will become a more passionate people. When the fires of God descend, we become a more loving, a more compassionate people. As much as I love the word passion, I love the word compassion even more, because as we all know, some passions are not holy. But compassion takes us to the heart of the gospel. Compassion has to do with a warm heart, a willing and generous spirit. Compassion means that you and I have this remarkable gift. We can get around our self-centeredness. We can break through our narcissism. We can actually see and feel, experience the pain, the anguish of another human being, and then respond with mercy and kindness. It is an incredible gift that we are given. And every single day of our lives, we choose between being like Pharaoh, hard-hearted, cold-hearted on the one hand, or warm-hearted on the other. Every day, we make dozens of decisions, one way or the other. And the calling of our incendiary God is to be a compassionate, warm-hearted people. If there is a single word that summarizes the entire gospel of Jesus Christ, the spirit of the New Testament, it is this: compassion. Perhaps the greatest parable that Jesus ever told. I don't need to remind you of it. A man travels the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, falls among thieves, left for dead. A priest, church leader passed by on the other side, and then a Samaritan, hated Samaritan by all the Jews, stops and has compassion. He stands in the presence of that man's suffering, and he practices the golden rule. He does for that man what he would want someone else to do for him in the same circumstance. Jesus lifts that up as the epitome of Christian living, as the very center of all of our spiritual striving, to feel another person's pain as a human being and to minister to them in the name of kindness and mercy. That's our calling from this God who delights to set fires in the human heart. It bothers me to look around and see how prevalent is the spirit of Pharaoh in our world, in our society. Have you noticed? There's a meanness of spirit abroad. There's a lack of compassion. There is coldness and hardness of heart on every hand. And what bothers me the most is when I find that in myself, Charlie Shook. Not very long ago, Lois and I were headed for the golf course, and because of last-minute needs for makeup and so on, we were running a little late on Lois's side. And I thought, even allowing for the heavy traffic, we were just going to make it, and we came to a stop. The red light was just there ahead. I think it was the intersection of 53 and State Route 41 and Bradenton. We were heading east. And there he was. In biblical terms, he was a beggar. He held a sign. He had the face of an abandoned church. And the word said veteran and homeless. I couldn't read the rest. And my first response was compassion. My heart went out to him. Then you know what happened? I thought about that damn tea time. And I also thought if I gave him money, he'd probably spend it on booze or drugs or cigarettes. And his sign was too small. You couldn't really read it, and he wasn't standing in a good place. If you were going to help this guy, you had to risk being rear-ended by another car. And I was off and running, and suddenly Lois was turning right at the intersection instead of going ahead. And I said, "What are you doing? We're going to be late for our tee-off time." She said, "We're going to McDonald's." Now, in my own defense, I paid for the cheeseburger, the large fries, and the Diet Coke. And by the time we circled around and got back to that man, and I lowered the window, I managed a smile and a kind word. We live in a world that cries out for humanity, for compassion. But the spirit of Pharaoh is abroad in our land. Sometimes it helps me to remember those times when I needed someone else's compassion. And then my heart is warm, and I become more human again. So I remembered back 17 years to the day I first came to Longboat Island Chapel. Lois and I've told this story before, forgive me for the repetition. Lois and I were church refugees. We had been evicted from our church home, and we had nowhere to go. And a friend said, "Why don't you see Jim Marsh?" And I'll never forget, I came to this chapel. He met with me and he listened for over an hour. And then he opened his arms and he took me in. And this has been our home ever since. When I came in this morning wearing a white outfit, Bobby Banan said, "You look just like Jim," and I took that as the highest possible compliment. The truth of the matter is I'm wearing white today because Lois thinks it makes me look cute. But close behind, I'm wearing white because I remember our dear friend and pastor, Jim Marsh. We worship an incendiary God who longs to ignite the fires of compassion and kindness, to make us warm-hearted human beings. So I hope you will join me in reciting the prayer of my friend. Lord, take our hands and strengthen them. Open our minds and illumine them. Touch our hearts and set us on fire.